Hi everyone, and welcome back to another evening of science presentations. If you missed us yesterday, we had 4 great student presentations on a bunch of different topics from Colin, Arnev, Annie, and one other student there. You can check that video on our Facebook page, as well as the same as yesterday as it is today. We'll have a few student presentations, and then we'll give you the chance to ask them a couple questions at any point during the talk. If you have presentations or questions on the student's presentation, you can type that in the comment section and we'll look at it again. First up, we have Charlotte, who's going to share her presentation with us. Hi, Charlotte. How's it going?
Hi, good.
Great. So Charlotte, I'm going to add your presentation here and then just pull myself out and let you go to it. And then we'll have time for a couple questions at the end of the presentation.
Okay, hi, I'm Charlotte, and I studied the effect of soil treatments on the sprouting time of cosmos, forget-me-not, and mustard seed plants. So over the past decade, climate change has become an increasingly pertinent global issue. And since the 1880s, the global temperatures have risen 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit. Additionally, carbon dioxide levels have drastically increased, reaching its highest amount in the last 650,000 years. These data points are reaching new heights. So there are many parts of the soil that are vital to its composition, such as water, microorganisms, and minerals. Any alterations to these could decrease plant biodiversity, which could affect humans in the long run. So narrowing the focus on mineral fertilizers, recent studies have shown that these increased plant height greatly. For my project, the research question was, how do different nutrient fertilizers or soil treatment affect the sprouting time of cosmos, forget-me-nots, and mustard seeds? The independent variable was soil treatment, and the dependent variable was sprouting time, and I also looked at plant height. My hypothesis was that the sprouting time would decrease as the levels of nutrient fertilizers increase, and I also hypothesized that plant height will increase as the amount of fertilizer increases. These are all my methods and materials. And then these are the data figures. The next few slides are data figures that I used, that I generated through our studio programming. So this first figure is examining the relationship between treatment types and mean sprouting time. As you can see, only 2 treatments had sprouts, treatment 2 and treatment 6. And the standard deviation for treatment 2 was 4.9, and the mean sprouting time was 6.15 centimeters. For treatment 6, the mean sprouting time was, days for the sprouting time. For treatment 6, the mean sprouting time was 1.435 days, and the standard deviation was 2.581. The p-value was 0.0042, which is significant. So moving on to mean height versus the treatment, only treatment 2 had sprouts. And so the p-value for this was 0.0000224, which is also significant. After noticing that treatment 2 was the only treatment that had sprouts, I looked at the plant heights for the different species, so the cosmos, the forget-me-nots, and the mustard seeds. Here you can see that species A had a mean plant height of 1.51 centimeters, and species B had an average plant height of 8.02. And the p-value was 0.00441. This is also significant data. So moving along to the discussion, my findings did not align with my hypothesis or any of the field studies that I researched. Only, as I have stated, only 2 pots had sprouts. This might have been because I could not control all variables, so the sunlight throughout the day may have varied, and the temperature of the soil may have been changing throughout the day, which might have affected the germination of the plants. Additionally, the soil treatments may have contained levels of pH that were too high or too low for the seeds to germinate. And perhaps this shows that climate change might have more negative impact than we have anticipated. Thank you.
Awesome, Charlotte. That's great. And so I just have a couple quick questions for you about your research. And this first one was, why did you choose the research question that you studied? What about this was interesting to you, and why did you choose to create a research project around it?
I've always been interested in climate change, and my freshman year, I did a project related to climate change, and I did it studying animals, and so I wanted to take a different route with this project and still staying underneath the umbrella of climate change, so I focused on plants this time. But climate change has always been a topic that I've been interested about and kind of wanted to learn more about and hopefully help out in the future.
Cool. Great. And then the last question that I have for you is this one was, in doing this whole project, what was one of the hardest parts or things that you had to work through to make it all work out?
I think the hardest part of this project was being okay with the idea that not all plants were going to sprout, and I needed to kind of move on and just keep going and keep doing my scientific analyses, even though I didn't have that much data, and finding out that it's okay that my findings did not align with my hypothesis, and being okay with that.
Well, yeah, that's a big part about science, especially when you're looking at things that are growing. Sometimes they don't grow. We have to figure out a way to move forward. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your hard work, Charlotte. We really appreciate that. Up next, we have Mihika, who's going to share her project. Hi, Mihika. How's it going?
Hi, how are you?
Great. I'll add your presentation in here and let you take it away. And then at any point, if anyone has any questions at the end, you can type them in the comments and we'll answer them before Mihika can answer them.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mihika, and the question that I studied was finding the correlation between views on inequality and climate change. So, a little background information on the different issues. A study that I read about said that 67% of the public feels that in the US, racial and ethnic discrimination is a big problem. And another study, which surveyed 2,000 Americans, found that nearly half of the 1,000 women surveyed reported facing gender discrimination nearly every day. So, just between these two studies, we can see that both inequality, racial based and sex based, is a very big issue in society today. Climate change is another very large and rapidly increasing issue. From air and water pollution to extreme weather to overpopulation, it surrounds us on a daily basis. So, why do these issues connect? Well, the first step to combating climate change is to understand how people perceive the issue. So, by analyzing the connection between people's racial or sexist biases and their opinions on combating climate change, we can begin to form connections and trends that help to understand how effectively to encourage everybody to combat climate change. In the end, my hypothesis, which was people who have more racial or sex biases will be less likely to combat climate change, holds true. So, in my research, my independent variable was my respondents' views on climate change, and the dependent variable was their view on social inequality. I think my hypothesis holds true because these two opinions, social inequality and climate change, both require similar mindsets within a person. So, the way I conducted my research was by having an online anonymous survey, which had multiple choice questions conducted on Google Forms. The survey was distributed through the Headwaters newsletter, personal social media platforms, various family connections, and I was even able to place a Facebook ad for about 4 days. I analyzed my data using Google Sheets and a software program, SPSS. So one of the main data analysis techniques I used was to create a score using the questions that I put in my survey. So here is a snapshot of my survey in the climate change section, which asked respondents how often they did an action in the past year. And based on how positively or negatively that action impacted the environment, I gave them a point for each section. I did the same for the next two sections, which played on racial biases and sex biases, and I also created two scores for those sections. Then, as you can see here, I compared every climate change score that I got to the average race scores in that section, and I got a positive trend line showing that as the climate change score of a respondent increases, so does the race score. And with an R-score value of 0.551, I can see that with 55% certainty, I can predict the race score from the climate change score, which is significant. Similarly, with the climate change score and the sexism score, I see the same positive increase with a R-squared value of 0.617. Another question that was in my survey was, how large of an impact do you think you have on the environment? And my respondents filled this out with a scale on 1 to 5. I then compared the answers of each number to the average race score that they got and the average sexism score they got. As you can see, I again find that there is a trend between the two values with an R-square score of 0.636 and 0.706. So when I compared the two lines that I had from my previous graphs, I can see that there is an increase up till the number 4 and then a dip in the till 5. I was interested in why this was, and so I put a little bit more research into this, and I found that scientists see that the accurate answer for the impact one has on the environment is around 3 to 4. So I can infer that as one gets more knowledgeable about their impact on the environment regarding climate change, their race score also increases. So all in all, as my respondents were more eager to combat climate change, they also have less racist and sexist biases. These conclusions match what I thought in my hypothesis. Additionally, many experts think that opinions on both views inequality and climate change are influenced strongly by others and also require the same mindset. Therefore, it would make sense that there is a correlation between these two issues. Understanding that there is a correlation between these issues can help make progress towards getting everyone to combat climate change effectively. A couple sources of errors that I could have faced when conducting my research was having an uneven demographic because I saw that I had many more liberals, people who saw themselves as liberals, than people who saw themselves as conservatives, and I also had a higher percentage of women fill out my survey than men. Another source of error was that a lot of my respondents could have possibly not filled out the survey with their honest opinions, but I don't think that this was that big of an issue because my survey was anonymous. Using this research, I think that future scientists can begin to discover ways to focus on the correct ways to get everyone to combat climate change effectively, especially now that through my research we can understand more on how these people think about these issues. Thank you for listening. Here are some of the sites that I used for my research, and thank you.
Oh, great job, Mihika. That's great. So if any of you watching at home have any questions for Mihika about her research, feel free to put those in the comments here. But I guess the first question that I have for you is basically, if you had any thoughts or ideas that now that we've maybe seen that there might be a link between holding racial and sexist biases and people's likelihood to take action on climate change, is there any, what's our next ideas for how we might address climate change and some of these other issues in a more holistic manner? Or what could be your recommendation for people trying to make a difference on these issues?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that using my research, I think now we know who to focus on, people who are maybe less motivated in combating climate change and such. And through their biases, we can also see how they think about other issues and how to maybe have a more friendly approach to convincing them to help us in combating climate change.
Awesome. And so I have this same question that I asked Charlotte as well. What about this caught your interest, or why did you choose this question to conduct your research project around?
Well, as I was trying to figure out a research question that I was interested, I knew that I wanted to do something that was related to combating climate change. And then with recent events and having a lot to do with inequality and racism and the Black Lives Matter movement, I thought that it would be really interesting to find specific connections in between bias
Cool.
regarding both.
Awesome. So thank you. That's really interesting and timely and relevant. So my last question for you before we kind of wrap things up and do a quick thank you is, what was the hardest part of your project, or one of the parts that took the most work as you were completing it?
I think the hardest part was also very interesting to me was using SPSS to analyze my data, as it's something that I haven't done before, and it was really interesting to use a different software.
Perfect. And just for those of you watching at home who maybe didn't see all the work behind Mihikas' project, I helped her with a couple of the things, and the level of stats that she was doing in SPSS is really quite high and at a upper level college level. And so you worked pretty hard on that. Nice work. And so with that, I'm gonna call Charlotte back here, and I just wanted to take this moment and then thank both of you for sharing your awesome science presentations, but then also thank a couple organizations who helped make this program possible. I know myself plus many other students and teachers were planning on doing all sorts of the great in-person science camps that we get to do during the summer. And with the COVID pandemic, we had to scramble and find something else. And these organizations, the Ser Optimist Foundation, the Tahoe Truckee Community Foundation, and the Los Altos Community Foundation, all, as well as a bunch of other individuals, all helped us out, supported us in making this research program possible, so we could give students like Charlotte and Mihika and some of the other ones we talked about yesterday the opportunity to do these great research projects. And so Mihika and Charlotte, I was hoping that you could just join me in saying a quick thank you, and just thank you for supporting this summer research program before we sign off today. So maybe we can just do it on a count of 3. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Thank you.
For supporting the summer research program. Awesome. And so nice job to both of you. You've done an incredible, awesome independent research project. And for those of you watching at home, you can tune back in next Wednesday and Thursday, where we'll show you even more awesome student science projects.